I would like to introduce you to our next speaker, Geneviève Vidal from Paris University 13. I'm really glad, Geneviève, that you could make it. And for us, it's quite interesting in a way to have French speakers at the conference, because we think that there's a lot of research going on in France, which probably with language barriers or whatever are not so well known in especially in Austria or in the German-speaking or English-speaking world, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. And okay, well, she will be. Her special focus is on the use of digital media in a cultural and in particular in museum settings, and she also looks into the social dimension of the new technology use. And I think it's also goes parallel a little bit with this notion that new technology will definitely or certainly change the way we experience museums, but also how museums, but also museums might be changed by the users using new technology.
I would like to present some issues of digital innovations. With the advent of digital innovations, transmedia, the Internet of Things, web of data, we have to not consider primacy of technology, but to focus on interactions between actors. And I think actors here, human or non-human, producers of data and contents. I propose to consider these interactions in the context of the encounter between a centralized network, museums, and a decentralized network, internet, particularly internet, which promotes other digital projects, including inside the museums. This encounter generates organizational and cultural innovations, which can be identified by analyzing the professional uses of digital technologies and new uses of museum mediation embedded in digital practices of public museums. Recently, we have noticed ambitious professional commitments and endogenous and exogenous movements of contents from museums and public. I propose to return 4 themes of analysis to figure out what is at stake in museum digital innovations. First, the methodologies of study of users. Secondly, uses of public. Then professional digital uses. And the last theme, the relations between public and museums. This theme invites us to think differently about prescriptions and museum diffusion regarding the development of web of data, of which museums are important actors. We have to study digital mediation uses in considering the methodological framework. Several qualitative studies of museum uses digital mediation since 2007 have confirmed that the museum sector is an observatory of digital innovations. It is an informal education environment. Digital technologies have been diversified into many applications, from functional interfaces to mobile and tactile interfaces considered as intuitive. The participative digital uses show new lines of analysis on the internet and in museums. The approach should allow to gather how the institution enters into relation with users and guide users' contributions according to ways. In an explicit way, for example, a call of drawing pictures, and in an implicit way, for example, spaces to leave comments, images about visits. The approach also aims to examine how public mobilize their digital practices in order to renew their relationships with museums and museum contents. Museums must take into account the traffic of traces of internet users, which allow to collect a large amount of data the behaviors through techniques of traceability related to big data. We must respect privacy on internet users. A museum must take into account also the social networks of users, students, friends, families, colleagues, museum visitors or not. Thus, museums contains flow. The study approach necessary considers mobility and versatility of users due to changes and frequent interruptions, and whose goals may evolve over time. Studying digital users is not limited to the assessment of satisfaction of ergo-cognitive users, or even a sociologie des usages, sociology of social users, that says what people do with technologies. We have to go over the simple observation of facts and states and focus above all on processes. More specifically, in museums, the follow-up of visitors should be favored on their users because a session implies social interactions in and out the museum, but also different kinds of practices that are evoked by discourses I call a meta-exhibition. The notion of meta-exhibition refers to discourses of the public about museum collections and about their activities in their everyday life and about their cultural experiences outside the exhibition. The meta-exhibition connects the museum to an exogenous space. To study digital uses, we can also consider open innovation. Open innovations consist in the combination of research and development, including experiments about users and public. These innovations currently give rise to living lab or organizational experiments as Museumix, maybe you know this French operation event, in order to consider other ways to design and implement digital mediations. It is interesting to lead test evaluations of first users. Now I present some results of studies in museums and in Internet Museum with 3 themes of analysis: meanings of users, ambivalence, double movement, endogenous, exogenous contents. In museums, some technologies are similar to those used in the daily lives of visitors, such as smartphones, tablet, pad. However, multi-touch interactive tables or glasses of augmented reality, multi-screen devices establish a relation of trust between museum and visitors. Visitors take possession of devices quite easily, although adults need more support than young audience. Visitors enjoy being part of the exhibition using new technology devices. But visitors may not have the time to use mediations. So the choice of a non-use of multimedia devices can be motivated by saving time. Non-use can also be linked to a critical posture. At an ergonomic level, for example, configuration, uses considered complex as multi-screen or pervasive environment, with ergonomic limits, for example, when the terminals react slowly for visitors. Visitors also complain to insufficient depth contained, and visitors are not interested in mediation below the technical potential, referring to their communication practices. Criticism is also expressed when visitors do not understand the link between interactive devices and exhibition. And they criticize also the redundancy between the multimedia and exhibition. We must also keep in mind that visitors do not want to be too much active with technologies that require effort. It is also very important for visitors to see the objects of the exhibition. Nevertheless, they can give many minutes to a multimedia consultation when it is connected to a personal interest, or when they want to debate confirming a critical posture. Between frustration and curiosity, visitors want extensions of discourses, narration by the mediations, maybe expected under augmented reality, but it is answered for the moment. Mediations that generate both curiosity and frustration criticize the limits and still the wish to deal with the exhibition in depth after the visit, thanks to a research of documents, particularly on the internet. We can observe also the fact that the mediations play a role that goes beyond the diffusion of a message. Mediations generate emotions, despite criticism and also fatigue. We can observe emotions when the museum offers games via mobile devices, such as an iPad, a smartphone, a Nintendo guide, or applications to upload on smartphones. Young visitors especially focus their attention on technology, as you know, I'm sure. During these studies in museums, we pointed a disposition for innovation. This is especially apparent with personal devices visitors, digital cameras and smartphones, to publish content, images, tweet, messages, outside of the museum, in order to show to their family or friends and to debate about themes during visit. The visit involves cultural and communication practices building new frontiers around the exhibition. Visitors become partners of the museum innovation, which it takes place in pervasive environments. But we have to rule out the paradigm which promotes the figure of an user actor of digital systems in order to go over performative discourses. Indeed, the user actor welcomes prescriptions. I suggest to go on with museum internet. On the internet, institutions establish proximity with the public. They invite them to participate in mediations in order to control the context of online communication. The museum territory on the internet, particularly with Web 2.0, gives to see experiments. But we must note the exhaustion of the designation of the Web 2. Because now Service 2.0 are included in internet, and we retain that those technologies are associated with marketing strategies which provide tools of contact. The multimediatization data museum sphere creates new access to information, collections, and knowledge in the field of arts, history, and sciences. We observe the fact that these technologies appear not to change the authority order and legitimacy of the circulation of knowledge of the museum. Through institutional websites and blog of museum or exogenous sites like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Flickr, for example, the main objective of the museum sector remains the dissemination of scientific and cultural offerings that to an audience to expand and to promote resources. The crowdsourcing mastered by museum with call for contributions, campagne de collecte, is also important for the relationships with their audience. Indeed, the Web 2 services by museums allows public to intervene on the contents and the form with the customization, personal spaces, for example, to exchange in forum, blogs, to describe with tags, for example, and to contribute with contents. The challenges of Museum Web 2 relate to the publication of data from public, who is visitor or not visitor of the museums, with the risk to no longer control the dissemination and the legitimacy of data. For these reasons, the museums joining a movement to structure data and online communications to rationalize inputs and outputs of amateur or profane contents. The results of digital user studies allow us to underline the fact that the digital mediation is at the heart of the mission of diffusion of heritage by the museum institution. New relations between public and museums open to a new way of thinking prescriptions and museum diffusion in the context of development partnerships between institutions and other institutions to think of the data stream of web of data. Between continuity and innovation, museums deploy a new diffusionist approach to scientific culture, history, art, heritage, with experiments that provide an experience of participation in the development of cultural innovations. The culture of interactivity of public museums now go beyond the action on interfaces and opens on actions on contents and on publication of contents by the public through a culture of software, applications, and networks. However, the social technical configuration does not mean the end of the unequal relations within culture, or relations of domination with prescriptions. With the renewal of prescription and diffusion, we can discuss the concept of prescriptions, which are present and ambivalently between constraint and dialogue. Indeed, prescriptions are expected by the public for access to the arts and sciences as part of a renunciation under conditions negotiated by public for their place at the heart of the exhibition and of the experiments innovations. Visitors enjoyed the experimentation of new gestures with screens, especially with screens. Studies of users' museum digital mediations enlighten the interactive museum experience when it exceeds the functional posture and ergo-cognitive uses, engaging study methodology with living lab test study during conception of the exhibition. The study of digital uses and practices can enter in the open innovation to think a network of heterogeneous data and consider what I call an interprescription. If museums want to take into account the inside and outside contents, they must also incorporate the prescriptions of the public, their content, their actions in the device. It says, institutions elaborate metadata to facilitate traffic exchange, treatment, a future semantic access to heritage and knowledge. Museums begin a rationalization of the interventions of users and a regulation through technical and editorial sophistication of digital mediation, keeping impenetrable technologies and professional skills such as indexing and structuring data. The web semantic should also allow the museum sector to maintain its prerogatives, while allowing semantic links to external cultural data, but nevertheless inflow control requiring agreements and partnership. Museums seem ready now for diffusion via the transmediatic devices, considering users of the public through their traceability by design. The question we might ask then, is it conceivable for museums to translate their expertise in scenography, museography, and mediation to invent narration and mediation for a museum transmedia? At the age of digital abundance, of competition of content and time of attention of public with their profound or expert subjectivities, partnerships are established. A technological sophistication is taking place with the processing of metadata and the web of data, including institutional platform databases collections. These new modalities of heritage circulation aim to promote and facilitate access to heritage resources thanks to a mutualization of competences, resources, and contents, thanks to partnerships signed with strategic objectives. For example, in France, the agreement between the French Ministry of Culture, French Institute of Research of Computer Science, l'INRIA, and Wikimedia. At the time of web of data and of a lack of financial resources to produce contents of museum. The appropriation of the internet and digital technologies by the museum sector shows the structuring process of cultural innovation based on information, communication, and digital mediation policies. Thank you.